Welcome to the Phoenix Effect podcast with Elle, Kristen, and Dennis. We are three narrative-trained therapists, and we will be interviewing storytellers from all walks of life. We will explore what people do to find belonging, purpose, and success. Listen in as we delve into the depths of the human experience. If you have a story you would like to tell, stay tuned to find out how to become a part of the show. Are you ready for a good story? Here we go. Hey, listeners. Dennis, Kristen, and I invited our friend Ray to be on the show. Ray was a part of our NFTC2 training, and we start off with hearing what it has been like for him to be a white Irish Australian in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then we enter a deeper conversation on desire. Enjoy the episode and send us an email at phoenixeffectpodcast@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube page to let us know, would you like to hear more from Ray?
I think this year I thought I was fit more in the orphan category, and I think I squarely see myself as a stranger, just an outsider wanting to belong. And if I could just kill that longing to belong, I'd be an okay human being. I haven't been able to kill it yet. So it puts me in quite a quandary, yeah?
Yeah, so you've noticed it more this year. How
Yeah.
have you noticed it coming up?
Oh, I'm a foreigner living in South Charlotte, and South Charlotte it's a banking community, and it's very conservative. And so I was saying to some friends this week that I feel like I work on the fringes of church with other people who are hanging around the fringes of churches. They've been hurt by church and they're hanging on to their faith. And so I'm a foreigner. I'm a white guy who looks like he belongs, but I don't. There's a different humor. There's a different way of doing whiteness from being an Australian to being a South Charlottean. So my neighbor is from Clemson University graduate, and he had twin 4-year-old boys. They just turned 4. And when he first moved in, I was thinking, we have twins. This is going to be neat. We're going to connect over twins. And I'm standing in the front yard chatting with him. And my neighbor from 4 houses up came down, and they suddenly started talking Clemson and Clemson football and Clemson being Clemson grads. I was like, I'm not part of this tribe. And so I felt my outsiderness again, right? Like the idea of, I felt they had a connection that had a whole language.
That just sounds super disappointing and painful as soon as the conversation shifts, because there's so much hope there at first, right? This guy with twins, we're going to have something. And then you lost him.
It was super fun. It's still there. I'd walk out the back and they'd be, Mr. Ray, look what I'm doing, Mr. Ray. I'm standing on your fence. They were super cute, these kids. I just been called Mr. Ray. And that's not an Australian thing, right? That's a very Southern thing. So being called Mr. Ray, Mr. Ray. Yeah. But yeah, I feel that often. And I think the strange part of doing NFTC has been that's only heightened it, right? Like I think the painful part about stir up longing, and they legitimize your desire to belong, and they legitimize your longing for connection. And then you go back and face the reality that you're living in. And so it feels, I think it's more painful and less crazy. It's helped me with the self-doubt, right? Because I would turn against myself for being a fool for wanting. So I think that's the work that I've been doing.
So am I hearing you right with before being aware of your desire and your longing for something, when you didn't receive it, you would turn against yourself?
Absolutely.
And now the awareness of the desire is there. So there's more pain because there's longing of desire that is not met. But instead of turning against yourself, you're able to place that pain on the rightful owner, so to speak.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm placing it anywhere, Kristen, as much as just, it's the $1 million question, isn't it? What do we do with it? The longing. Like I want to say I've gotten more spiritual, or I'm still working on the resilient. I think I felt I think the goal this year has been to build resilience, that you're starting a group on your own and you're leading other people. And I'm still working on the resilient. It feels more vulnerable. Like I feel younger. And I think that shows up in the counselor's room, in that I'm more able to be present with people while they're being vulnerable. But I thought healing would be, I don't know, I'd be dynamic or something. Like I'd have an answer for everything. And I just thought I'd be stronger. And I think it's just a different definition of what strength is, I think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was getting ready to ask.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you to be strong?
I noticed myself making observations of people's stories. And I think they're helpful, right? Like I make some observations that help people, but making observations is not the same as feeling with them. So I think that even gets more intense for me when I think about if it's my own daughters, right? I think I've made observations that have been really wounding, and they're me trying to be helpful. And what they're wanting is, they don't want a therapist, they want a father, which is someone, they want comfort, containment, attunement. So the idea of being present with and to someone is, I saw myself standing off people and making observations, and it's from a distance, and it's safer, and it's not. What was your question again? Did I answer it?
No, I think you are answering that. I think you're really onto something. And then how do you get into the feeling of the emotions with the people? Like, how would you get in? Have you felt that before? I feel like you've done that before, Ray. I know you do that. Is it you don't do it as frequently as you like, or that sometimes you find yourself in your head at a distance making observations about what you're seeing, but you're not connected in with the feelings and emotions that the individual's talking about? Can you tell me more?
Dennis, I think it's like when you're processing what's happening in the moment, right? Like an observation, I think, comes from my head. It comes more from my head, trying to be present with someone. So yeah, I make observations of what I saw happen, as opposed to be curious about what I saw happen. Right? I noticed this, right? Which is much safer than what happened in you there.
What feels safer about that?
I think maybe safer is, I think it's still performative, Kristen. Like the emphasis is more on my observation than it is on what's happening in the person. And so I think I'm wanting them to, oh, look at your clever observation. Thank you so much for your clever observation. Safer that way. I just feel the separateness of it. Maybe safety isn't I think I'm performing. Right?
It feels like you're in your head.
Yes.
And it's harder to engage your body and your heart if it's too close to your own desire.
Yes. 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 Oh, yeah. Okay. We're doing good. We're doing good. I can feel what we're circling.
Yeah.
I'm wondering too about, a statement is quite declarative and end of sentence.
Yeah.
I've stated it. A question, there's a lot of room for the unknown.
Yes.
And you're not quite sure what it's going to touch. And it might touch on something ouchy.
This might go somewhere I'm not expecting. I can't predict it.
You don't know what it's going to bring up in somebody else. You don't know what it's going to bring up in yourself.
Yep. For sure. Yep.
And isn't that where the magic happens?
Yeah. Yeah. Where the magic happens, huh? I feel like you are both leaning in, and I feel the discomfort of it. I feel that. Whoa, guys, like we're just chatting. Wow. Yeah. A lifetime of turning against oneself, right? Just to manage that being on the outside, and to be received is really unsettling. To be, just wow. Oh boy, I feel the push to just want to go make jokes and make light and push away. A lifetime of desire being wed to shame, right? I've always interpreted my hungry little boy as shameful. And and being ever so severe, right? I punished the hell out of that kid. And it feels, and I'm just afraid to hope, right? I'm afraid to dream. It's painful to look up and see that you want everything. I want more. I want the whole garage full of toys. I'm a covetous boy from the wrong side of town. And really all I've wanted is to have a conversation with my father that was about something real.
That would have been such a connection for you if you were able
Yeah.
to just talk to him.
Yeah, I think of the letter I wrote to my dad at 35. Can we talk about our family history? Can we talk about why we really left Northern Ireland and emigrated to Australia? Can we talk about why my sister went away for a year? And he came back holding it by the corner the next morning and called it, "This is really dark. I want you to take it back." And that's the longing of my heart, right? I am longing. And it was something really good. That's me reaching out. I spent months, editing that paper so that all the angry bits and all the accusatory bits and were sanded off, right? All the sharp edges were sanded off. And he wanted nothing to do with it. And he called it dark, right? That's the part I think I've wrestled with more in the last couple of years. It's just, I think that's a theme, right? My desire has been called dark all my life. And he was the good preacher in the pulpit telling people they'd be lost for all eternity.
And so if that guy in the pulpit says that you're dark, that must be true.
Actually, that letter was my moment of emancipation. I think, Al, I had enough, what's it called? Individuation from him. I had enough, that's not the right word. I had enough distance from him, use a good clinical word, enough distance to realize that in that moment, I realized this isn't me, this is him. And this is the way that he's done me all my life. But it captures where I wrestled, right? The idea of the man in the pulpit is the righteous one who gives altar calls and people go forward and they come to Jesus. And I'm out hanging out with my stoner mates on the edge of church who are struggling with belief and wrestling with the structures of church. So that's who I find myself working with, right? They're the people who have wanted to have conversations with their fathers and their mothers, and they got shamed for it. And they've done harm to themselves and harm to others out of that. And I get to sit with them, say, I get it. And they feel gotten.
Because you've allowed yourself to enter into your own pain and be with that pain. You have the tolerance to sit with them.
Yeah, and I'm more and more going, yeah, I don't know. I can receive that now, Al, where I don't think I could receive that before. I'm like, damn straight. Yeah, I hang out with people and it's a good thing. Yeah, that what I do is full of dignity and has real value.
You're describing you're with the people on the outside, the perimeter, the people that want a connection to a father but don't know how to get it. That sounds so much like where Jesus would have hung out. Right? He didn't really want a lot to do with the religious structure.
Yep.
He wanted the down and outs. He wanted the people that really wanted a connection to the Father.
Yep.
Those are your people.
Those are our people, right? Aren't they?
Yeah.
Those are our people. I think a story that's been running through me recently is the disciples on the road to, after his resurrection, he falls in beside two of his disciples or two of his followers. I don't even think it was the disciples, right? And afterwards, when he leaves them, he goes, didn't our hearts burn within us? And there's something about that where you know that you've had a taste of something. And so, damn the Allender Center and all its stirring up of longing, because our hearts burn within us. We want its resurrected desire. I was awakened to something. I want that again. And I want that. I want to offer that. And it's where life is found, right? Like where the magic happens, right? It's the place where we know that people are talking about things they've wanted to talk about for a long time.
And the talk about football and where people went to college, not that there's anything wrong with talking about it, but that's just not going to do it for you.
Yep, that's true.
So it would make a lot of sense if you're left wanting.
Yeah. But I still like to fly. I would like to fly my Clemson flag. I can't even call it my Clemson flag, right? Like the orange paw, right? Because my in-laws are Clemson grads too. It's a wonderful school. It's a great football program. I've watched their games. I've got a lot of enjoyment out of them. But yes, yeah. Well, I came on here to do some wrestling, right? Like, I was like, where does the wrestling start? You're all
Sure.
being very kind to me. Delightful.
At this point in the conversation, Ray becomes uncomfortable with the care we offer and pivots to engaging Dennis. Sometimes it can be hard for our bodies to tolerate good care, even when we want it so badly. We move on to Dennis to give Ray a moment to recalibrate his emotions. Listen to what happens next. Dennis, are you up for a wrestle? We haven't heard as much from you. Do you want to do some wrestling?
Dennis.
No, gosh. No, this is great, man. It's so good to see you, dude. So good to see you.
Yeah. Are you still in Nashville?
No, I am back in my home in Akron, Ohio.
Akron.
Akron, Ohio.
So you're not on the river?
Not on the river anymore.
Oh, dang. That was such a beautiful spot.
It was so beautiful there.
Yep.
So incredible.
Yep.
It was a beautiful year, Ray. So much happened for me in that year. Yeah, talk about like longing and desire and the intersection of all that. It is funny as we're talking about the neighborhood chats, because I don't know, like, here's something I'm curious about. It does seem like everybody's got this deep longing in them. I can't imagine where people don't have it or have not had it. And then what you're describing, and the same is true for me, is like this long search of like still pursuing that longing, but it's freaking hard. It's really hard to pursue the longing. And then part of that is pointing out the truths and even admitting stuff that we don't want to admit. You use that term, a hungry little man. Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah, when I touch it, Dennis, I feel very young.
Yeah.
And I haven't been kind to that guy. Like there's a growl in me at him. Like
there's like something in this. And honestly, not only maybe are we not kind to that little person in ourselves that's like hungry and longing, but other people aren't very kind either when they see it.
Yeah.
And do you have a sense why that might be, Dennis?
I feel like it's somehow like just tied deeply into contempt.
Which is next door neighbors to shame.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's a familiar place for me. Let me share two kind of stories here. And I'm curious if you guys can have a go at like maybe seeing if there's a connection between these two, or seeing if there's like a bind in these two. One of them we texted about. It was like, because my son was wrestling, just finished his junior year, had a great wrestling season, and then brought me back in time to my days in high school wrestling. And I remember being in this wrestling tournament. Our main coach, you could have it at any given time in these tournaments, there'd be like 7 of your kids from your team all wrestling on different mats. So the coaches get spread thin. And I was over wrestling a dude, and we had like a kid that had just graduated that I knew because he had been on the team when I was like a freshman. But now he's sitting in the coach's chair for me on my side of the mat. And started off getting a couple takedowns on this kid that I was wrestling, and then just was running out of gas. Man, I was losing so much weight in wrestling season. I weighed like 164, and each week I'm dropping down to 152. So the way it was like a cycle. Friday, you would get down to that weight, you'd weigh in, you'd wrestle Friday, you'd have to weigh in Saturday morning. And then pretty much from Saturday till Tuesday night the following week, I was eating, and I went from 152 back up to 164, 165. And then you'd start in a period of 3 days, I'd lose 12, 13 pounds. But I didn't account for that taking stuff out of me. I just found myself not having the energy that I needed. I found myself in this match where in the beginning I was able to get takedowns. Now I'm worn out. And the ref's calling me for stalling. And I'm giving up points. I'm giving up stall points. And I have 5 seconds left, and I've got like 2 points on this kid. And in the last 5 seconds, the ref gives this kid another stall on me that gives him 2 points. Now it goes into overtime, and I'm just like exhausted. But I'm feeling like I can beat this kid still. So we start the overtime, and unfortunately, then the same thing plays out. Like I get a takedown early, and then he ends up getting like a reversal on me, and I lose. And then the kid in the corner looks at me and says, "You don't have any heart. You lost that match because you don't have any heart." And yeah, that's just been something I've lived with. And I want to have heart so bad. I want to so bad have heart. And normally when I show up in all sorts of places, I'm always bringing my full heart with me and still trying. And here's an interesting one because it involves, I'm at this men's recovery week. It's where I decided to go there in the spring. So it's relatively recent. So I go there in the spring, relatively recent. It's got a story framework to it where you're meant to write out a story. I don't know that if they gave the directions of all the stuff you're supposed to do, but felt like I had done like a lot of work in story, and I was ready to really move into at a deeper level the story of abuse that had happened for me at age 5. So I wrote out like a lot of detail, spent a lot of time kind of rereading the story I wrote. Actually printed out some pictures of myself in that age, brought it all up with me to this event this weekend. And I dressed nice.
You've been known to do that, yes? We can testify to that.
So I show up and I get assigned to this group, and then I get asked to do my story. And I'm like, really been looking forward to this. And I'm showing like, here's the pictures of me. This is this is me at 5. This is me at 5. And then I like read my story. But the guys that are in my group don't quite look like me at all. And the guys that are in my group had not written out stories, nor had they brought pictures. And now I was feeling a lot of judgment. And people are asking me, the dude the guy assigned to us, he's actually written a couple books, really knowledgeable in that realm, like looks at me and he's, what's all this? And he's like pointing out like my clean cut look on my nice dress that stands out from the group. So do you see the bind between those two stories? I do want to be noticed. I do want to do a good job. And I almost think like Jesus likes that. Jesus wants me not to like tone it down. He like made me this way. And yet most places I go, I frequently find myself meeting this contempt. There was feel of contempt around me that moment, right? I almost wonder if out on the street, as you're talking to those dudes from Clemson, because now you're talking at a deeper level that makes most guys feel pretty uncomfortable, if there's some contempt brewing in them. Because they can feel it in you. They can feel you are deeper than their depth. And it probably scares the hell out of them. And now they want to talk about football, which they know you're probably not. They can tell pretty right away that you're not from that area.
But what would it mean? What would it mean for us to stay with you, Dennis, in that story? Because there's what the other guys are doing, but what's happening in your heart?
I want to get out of here really quick. I want to go back to your story. Right? It's scary. It's like scary, like to show that actually I do have like desires is hard. It's hard. It's hard to show that. And then to show that here's where my desire wasn't enough and I lost because I didn't have enough of it. And then here's where it became too much and it makes people around me uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I'm relating to you on the pain of being mishandled in my longing, right? And right? And there's no doubt in both of those places you were grossly mishandled.
It is interesting. I thought the other place for sure was the safe place. Like, how can there not be a safer place than this to like, you would think that there would be no wrong anybody could do.
I'm feeling conflicted because I want to stick with Ray and I want to stick with Dennis. I'm sure where to go. I'm curious, Dennis, if you wouldn't have gotten that comment about not having heart, would you still have showed up the same way to that weekend?
My felt sense, Kristen, is yes. Like, I still am all in. I'm still all in. I think that comment about the heart, there's a lot in that one because I like to win so bad and I lost. And I felt like I just felt like I had it and I didn't give it, if that makes sense.
Can I just name, I think it's more than wanting to win. It feels like a longing to be delighted in.
Hmm.
And you show up in the most glorious form of you. And both times it's met with contempt, which I'm guessing is masking something like envy. So if your desire to be delighted in touches somebody else's envy, too bad for you.
Yeah, I know that and I know, like, when I think through it, Al, like, I feel like that envy is contempt, which is an effort on someone's part to rebalance the power. They're feeling like they want to rebalance the power by making me feel very little because they're feeling little. So I know it's more about them and probably less about me, but it does really hurt. And then why would it hurt? If I know that it's more about them and less about me, why does it all still hurt so bad?
Because there's still that longing.
Mm.
I want to be delighted in.
And you want to belong.
Yeah, those are so good. And they bring so much pain yeah.
Ray, what's stirring up for you?
Oh, I'm back in his bind of if he shows up with his full heart, you feel it in your body as contempt for you. And you don't have any heart is a very contemptuous thing to say to you too. And it's a lie. You're working your ass off to make the weight and you're stalling so that you can get your energy back to resume the fight. You're working your ass off. It's full of heart. And it's not a caring comment, right? Like he doesn't read you and see you how hard you're working.
Ooh, something's coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. That is true. Yeah. It just touched me like even though I know all of that, I still feel like I could have still done it. And when I start thinking with my head and then just Ray's connecting and reminding me of what I actually know in my body to be true, that my stalling was just trying to get a little bit of a second wind. And I was doing everything I possibly could have.
Mm-hmm.
And it just didn't have the result that I desired, but that wasn't because of a lack of heart. Yeah, thanks, Ray.
You wanted to be seen as good. You wanted them to see how hard you'd been working.
Yeah. The thing about the wrestling is that you get your hand like raised up. There's just no better feeling. Like there's no better feeling than when the ref grabs two hands and holds one up. It's exhilarating. And then when your hand's not getting held up, it's so hard. So hard.
And that's the honor we're made for, right? Like for me, it's the idea of being honored, celebrated. And I long for that, right? Like I think about the ovation that the president gets when he delivers the State of the Union, right? Like there's six deep either side and he's shaking everybody's hand. It's standing ovation for 20 minutes, Dallas. And then they listen to him, right?
Ray's moving in close to your longing, to your desire. He's not backing off. And it looks like something's happening in your body as he moves close to it.
Yeah. Yeah. What an incredible feeling. And I wasn't expecting this. And yeah, something about having a man, I think gets to the longing of what I would have desired from my dad to be naming for me after the end of that match. And I didn't receive that. And I then left to turn it myself over 30 some years ago from a 7-minute wrestling match 30 plus years ago. No, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. You want us to leave you alone? I just realized I got a whole sermon to preach at you.
I can't handle, I just can't, almost can't handle care. It's just crazy. I love it and I appreciate it. And now I feel like I've had enough and I want to get the hell out.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how Ray was feeling earlier.
Yeah, very much. Yep, very much. Yep. I hope you saw it on me too, Dennis. I was being cared for, and I'm like, okay, it's time for the wrestling to start. That's enough.
Yeah, I didn't know why that was though till now.
Sure.
In this next part, Kristen steps in and boldly asks to turn the conversation back to Ray. And we tie it all together. We name the longing in our hearts to be seen as good and not too much, and the healing that can happen in the sacred space of a story group.
Can we titrate, and would it be okay to put some focus back on Ray for a little bit? Because I have a couple thoughts. Does that feel okay, Dennis? I don't want to abandon you in your care. And
This is all super connected. I love the connections we're making and being able to go back to other parts that we had been at earlier. I love that.
Ray, when you were speaking to Dennis, I felt like those words were also applicable to the version of Ray who was writing a letter to his father.
Oh, yeah.
And I think what made you so able to speak so well to Dennis's wound and desire is because it's what you needed to hear. And you didn't hear. And I was struck earlier as we were talking about there is something so beautiful about being able to be the person who can meet the needs of others in the way that your need was not met. And yet that does nothing to feel the longing in your heart to have that need met. And it feels so unfair that you can do the work to figure out how to meet the need. And yet the person who you need to meet that need can't do that work.
It does feel unfair, Kristen, and it feels like privilege, right? Like I am that boy, right? That boy on the mat is working his ass off. And that part of being a therapist is that can be what I'm relying on. And then I'm not taking care of myself, right? That can be, and that saw me burn out in 2019. I was burnt out, and that's why NFTC has been so precious to me. It's coming back to my source, and it's where I've been cared for, and just getting grounded again. And my original, trained in this stuff 30 years ago. And obviously Dan's not where he was 30 years ago. Sue Cunningham was a year ahead of me in the program. And one of the things I remember about her husband got accepted into Yale, and she called a whole dorm meeting, probably 15 or 16 of us, and announced, and she went, "My husband just got into Yale." And I was like, that's a really cool thing. Wow, this chick is really cool. Like, this woman is really, look at her, honor her husband like that. And everybody like just toasted him, and it was just this celebration of, and I was like, I remembered that 28 years later. I remembered that one story of a woman honoring her husband.
About that touched you.
So cool. That's not what I knew. Not the way my mother interacted with my father, right? She was mad at him most of the time.
It touched a longing.
Oh, yeah. It was like, that is really cool. That can happen. Right? Women do that. Wow.
You're burning out in 2019, and then you move into the NFTC work. What's
Yeah.
happening there that's shifting something for you?
I think I've been running on fumes for so long and not being kind to myself, right? And just got in a caring community, right? Like where I got to read stories and I got to bring me and I got to be told I wasn't crazy for wanting so much. I think the uncoupling in the second group of the shame of my abuse, of realizing where I had felt complicit in the harm done to me. And perhaps we can bring that story sometime, but that was very freeing for me. Like I really saw how I had blamed myself for what happened to my girlfriend.
So you're feeling this shame over being complicit in your abuse, and then a whole group of people enter into the story with you, and we refuse to throw a stone. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And kept pushing in where I was like, I felt the plates like Dennis felt, and where I felt it earlier. Okay, that's enough. But kept pressing into the story, and people talked about what happened. And I'm like in a group of people, and we're talking about this, and you all were talking about it. And it was like, and it was women and men. And it was like, it wasn't shameful. It was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. And I'm like, what the hell is happening? This is like freaking surreal. Yeah, you got no idea. I asked my dad at 14 or 15, can we talk about the M word? Can we talk about masturbation? And he read to me, who can approach the hill of the Lord? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. I was like, dang, that's brilliant. He got me coming and going, didn't he? I am unclean. And I never had another conversation about sexuality until I was into my 30s. So from 14 to mid 30s, I never had another conversation about sexuality.
Of course you didn't.
Hmm?
Of course you didn't.
Yeah.
You wanted to be clean. What a beautiful desire.
I spent a lot of time wallowing around in shame. So did I answer your question, Kristen?
I don't know if it was a question as much as an observation.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I appreciate the redirect.
And might I add, your father's answer to your question was an impossible task, right? Such an impossible task that he sends you on,
Yep.
in which he's actually proclaiming the power of Jesus. Why would the power of Jesus make a difference in people's lives?
He sent me out on the search of not being able to come back until my heart was pure and my hands were clean. It was an impossible quest, right, Dennis? It was like, and the prodigal, I got to come back and I was covered in pig shit and I was hugged on the neck. I didn't have to clean up before I came home. Stranger, right? The welcome is the thing, right? It's someone welcoming me and in my sense of unworthiness, right? Like like I will never forget that conversation in NFTC too, where everybody's talking about what I've just told in my story. And it's a normal conversation. And I needed to pinch myself. I'm like, oh my God, we're actually having a real conversation about this. And I've wanted to do this for 30 years. And we were just sitting talking. It was just such a natural conversation, right? Oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Oh yeah. I'm like, what?
You were not too much for us.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think you're naming what so many of us want to name. We just want to have people say, you're here. Welcome
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. Yeah. But your words, Al, about you're not too much. My story has felt like it's too much. I can't talk about this. You can't bring up, like, we're going to talk. I remember my pastor saying, and I think this is the first time at a lunch or a coffee date where I've said masturbation in public. It's like, okay. Yeah, I wasn't too much for y'all. And nobody shamed me like they did at Dennis's, right? retreat. It was, yeah, let's have this conversation. Let's talk about it. This really was abusive. Now that was dark, right?
What was done to you was dark. You were not
Yes.
dark.
Yes. So what was dark was properly named, as opposed to me being called dark, right? Like my desire, my longing to connect with my father was not what was dark. Yeah.
Thanks for letting us know the impact that's still with you. That means a lot to me to hear.
Oh, yeah. It was something uncoupled in me that day. And just in the same way, I think somebody names Dennis as a man with no heart, and that gets in and attaches, right? And it's a curse. It's a curse that's spoken of. I want to oppose that with everything in me. Right? Like, I want to break that curse. That's a lie. Somebody spoke a lie to you that day. Like, my conversation with you all around my own story of abuse was an uncoupling, right? And in the same way as it's really hard to get that curse out of your heart, the uncoupling is you can't unsee it. You can't. I felt it. I was welcomed. In what I thought was dark, I was welcomed. And nobody moved away. Yeah, and I know something happened that day. And that's what we need to remember moving forward. Like when I feel crazy again, I go, no, I remember that day. And I remember it like I felt it in my body. I felt it. I tasted something, right? Like taste and see. I tasted something that day. And I can't untaste it. In community, right? That's what we believe. It happens in a conversation together. The harm is done in community. The harm is done in person, and it's undone in person. And I certainly tasted that day.
Thanks, Ray. I think that's why I wanted to do a podcast, is because I want people to know about that.
Yeah. I love that you're doing a podcast. I have microphone envy.
You're welcome on here anytime, right?
Well,
we want people to get a taste of this.
I got to go and get me a bigger microphone.
When is your birthday?
Oh, no.
No.
Yeah, no, I'm really thrilled you're doing a podcast, Elle. Like, good for you.
Hey, thanks for coming on and letting people hear what happened and what can happen if they'll come and be a part of a group.
Yeah, thanks for setting the table.
And that's where we end today. We are so glad you joined us. We want to invite you to get involved in the show. First, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. That way, you don't miss out on a future episode. If you're super curious, you can also find us on YouTube. Second, if you'd like to learn more about joining us and sharing your story, send us an email at phoenixeffectpodcast@gmail.com. That's phoenixeffectpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. This podcast and website represents the opinions of Elizabeth Key, Kristen Boskel-John, and Dennis Roberts, and their guests to the show and website. The content here should not be taken as medical or psychological advice. This content is for informational purposes only, and because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. The views and opinions expressed in the podcast and website are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a therapist-client relationship.